Hi, Governor Shaheen. Thank you for meeting with me
It's my
here today at
pleasure.
the YWCA. We've been working on a project where we're trying to speak to folks running for public office about the nonprofit sector. Nationally, the nonprofit sector in the United States fuels about 10% of the economy. We have millions of volunteers who work for nonprofits, and we provide services to families at risk. We provide domestic violence services, after-school programs, Meals on Wheels. But the nonprofit sector is also a lot of higher education, hospitals, medical associations. They fall under the nonprofit category as well. So our broad question to you is really a two-part question. And one is how the nonprofit community has impacted your life, and if elected, what you would do to help strengthen and support the nonprofit sector.
Well, fortunately, I've had the benefit to be involved with a number of nonprofits over the years. When I was first starting out in my career, I got to start a nonprofit called the Somersworth International Children's Festival, and it was and is a wonderful street fair that celebrates the children and the ethnic heritage of the city of Somersworth. And I got to see what a difference that made for the community, how it brought the community together and got people thinking about and celebrating their heritage and really working together in a way that they hadn't before that festival started. About the same time, I also was involved, I was on the Commission on the Status of Women and worked with a number of commission members to start the New Hampshire Women's Lobby. And we have seen over the years what a difference the Women's Lobby has made for so many women and families in the state. And of course, when I was governor, I was involved with a number of folks in state government and in the private sector with starting the Land and Community Heritage Investment Program, which again has made a huge difference in preserving so many of New Hampshire's special places and our beautiful landscape. And also worked very closely with Early Learning New Hampshire to help promote early childhood education in the state. And currently serve on the board of the Nellie Mae Foundation, which is the largest education foundation in New England in supporting educational programs, particularly for underserved students and communities. And so I've seen what a difference the nonprofit sector makes in so many ways, and providing services, as you all do so well here at the Y, for people, but also in preserving so much of what's very special about our communities and our state, and I know it's true in so many other places. So I think our nonprofit sector is a critical part of what we've got to preserve in our country and in our communities. And I think we need federal policies in Washington to encourage that. Certainly as a senator, those are the kinds of policies that I would support. I think we've got to make sure that we keep the charitable tax deduction. We've got to do what we can to encourage volunteers to continue to give to our nonprofit sector. You know, as you pointed out, so many of our essential services really are provided by the nonprofit sector here in New Hampshire. You employ about 13% of people in the state, and it's not just the essential services, but often our nonprofits are doing things that both the public and the private sector either can't or won't do.
Right.
And I think one of the most exciting things about the new movement as we're looking at nonprofits is the whole social entrepreneurism that has grown up, that is encouraging nonprofits that are doing a great job to think about going to scale with those programs. So thinking about how we do that with something like Early Learning New Hampshire, or how we do that with City Year, which is a wonderful program that is now operating in a number of states around the country. We've got to make sure that we continue these very important efforts, and I think federal government has a role in encouraging that and making sure that we continue to support the volunteers who are making our nonprofits work.
So it's fabulous to hear your experience with nonprofits. I actually live in Somersworth, so,
so you know
which
that
you
very
didn't know,
well.
but I do know the Children's Festival. We've been there, I think, since its second year. So,
Good.
so we see nonprofits that start. New Hampshire now has over 7,000 nonprofits.
Right.
And we don't have a lot of infrastructure for nonprofits, and as we've seen over the last the last decade, federal government is pulling out of providing some essential services for families. So I see on one hand, we do the essential services, sheltering people who are homeless, but on the other hand, it's such a quality of life that we bring through events like the Children's Festival, or the Women's Lobby. Those are not direct service nonprofits. So how do you see, sort of on a national level, because I do think we need some assistance on a national level of sharing best practices, of finding out in similar states in other parts of the country, what are they doing that works? I could see that the government could be a conduit for that sharing of information. Any thoughts on that type of program?
Well, that's an interesting idea. I would think that, excuse me, that one model we might look at is something like the Corporation for National Service, where they have a center that provides assistance for local programs in states and communities around the country. And I think that kind of a center that could promote, as you say, leadership development, that could promote, share what's working from state to state, that could promote policies that encourage volunteerism. I think that the interesting thing about that kind of an initiative, and the important thing about it is, as we're looking at the services that need to be provided, and you were talking about some of those, as we're looking at the capacity that we have to provide those services, government can't do that. The private sector is not doing it, and it's really the nonprofit sector that's providing those kinds of services. And the more effective we can make the nonprofit sector, the better they're going to be able to provide those services, and the more effective and better everything is going to work. So I think there could be some real benefits to both the public and the private sector by providing that kind of support to nonprofits.
And it's interesting, I read about our government rebuilding infrastructure in other parts of the world, and we'll have young women primarily apply for jobs here, and they're so burdened with debt, finishing their education, that they can't afford to work here. Or I have directors working second jobs. I try to use these conversations as an opportunity to advocate as well. So one of the things that I would be very interested in seeing is tuition loan forgiveness for folks who go into not just teaching and healthcare, but also nonprofit sectors.
Absolutely. I just gave a speech on the economy today, and one of the things I mentioned in that is how we encourage and make sure that young people can afford to go to college. And one of the things that we need to be doing more of is providing that kind of loan forgiveness in exchange for community and national service. It's a win-win. It gets students to college, and then it also allows us to get them to then work in the public sector, the nonprofit sector, in those kind of jobs where we really need people. I was down at UNH last spring, and I was talking to a number of students about their loan challenges, and I had one young woman say to me, I really want to go to work in the nonprofit sector, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that because I have all this debt that I have to pay off. And what a benefit it would be if she had the opportunity to help pay back that debt by going to work for a nonprofit doing what she really wants to do.
That's right. And even, if young folks work in a nonprofit, it's not for everybody, but if folks did 2 or 3 years and then went to Wall Street or to banking,
absolutely.
It would just enrich their experience.
Yes, and there are actually some firms. I had the opportunity to talk to a business California not too long ago, and that was part of their requirement for the new managers that they were hiring, was that they spend 6 months working in the nonprofit sector, giving back to the community.
Fabulous.
And, yeah, so it's something that, you know, the business community is getting involved in too.
Right, that's great. Do you have anything you'd like to add on your either thoughts on helping nonprofits or, you know, additional experiences you've had?
Well, you know, when I was governor, I tried to make sure that my door was always open to people in the nonprofit sector as we were thinking about policies that would affect the nonprofit sector, whether it was, you know, with the Land and Community Heritage Investment Program, as we were working on starting that up, making sure that we had nonprofits in the environmental community involved with that. The same with Early Learning New Hampshire, getting, you know, child care organizations involved with that. I would certainly continue to do that as the senator. As I said, I think the move to social entrepreneurism and the exciting initiatives that are going on through so much of the nonprofit sector really offers tremendous hope for how we deliver services in so many ways in the future. Because a lot of the successes that are happening in terms of providing services are happening in the nonprofit sector. And we need to look at what's working and try and support that. And I would certainly do that if I'm elected to the United States Senate.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.